Hello there and welcome back. It's always a pleasure to return to your screens with a new development, a new story, or a new guest. Today we are having a conversation with Mr. Herbert Mensah. I hope that is how they pronounce the name. He is the president of World Rugby's African Association, Rugby Africa. Mr. Mensah, welcome. Thank you for making time to talk to us.
Thank you as well. Thank you very much.
I got the name right?
As close as, and I'm not
Please.
sensitive. I'm not sensitive.
Please.
No, the Herbert is Mensah.
It's Mensah.
But I think sometimes people get too sensitive about names, don't you?
How have you
Very
been?
good.
Yeah.
Very good indeed.
Yeah. How is Kigali treating you, and how was your experience so far?
Experience is good. You know, you come in on business, so you don't get to see the greatness of a city. But Rwanda is a place I've always wanted to come to. It's my first time. Kigali is your capital. There are so many emotive reasons for wanting to come to Rwanda. Yes. Mine is really based upon the fact that I am such a belief in Africa. I believe that Africa has the opportunity to grow and expand. It has qualities that the rest of the world does not have. If it is in sports, the greatest athletes, I keep telling the world, are from this continent of 1.4 billion people. In my sport, we are double world champions. Double. It's difficult to repeat that, and that is South Africa. If it is at the Olympics, we've got runners and athletes who can perform without the investment, without the nutrition, the strength, conditioning, training. Africa has something that is true. It has something that's truly unique. And yet within Africa, there are gems. And Rwanda is a gem. Rwanda is a gem. We can talk about history and the whole of Africa. I come from Ghana. You drive down the coast, you see slave forts. We see the forts that hosted, if that's the wrong word, housed the slaves and that went into the Americas and helped develop America today. The whole of Africa has a history. And the history tells us who we are and prepares us for the future. Then you deal with the reality of the fast-moving world that doesn't care about history. We do as Africans. The global world doesn't. And then what we desperately look for is that you look for the gems in Africa, and Rwanda is one, that says, how do we harness the brilliance that is Africa? And take that brilliance to give us equity in the global world. And you can read it, you can see, and clearly, with Rwanda, they have set a certain benchmark, and you come to a beautifully clean and awesome city like Kigali, and it sets a benchmark. You look at where you're going, it sets a benchmark. I was with some people from Rwanda, and they were telling me about your gold refinery in Rwanda. I mean, how progressive is that?
There's been a lot of progress that has been made over the past 30 years. Because when you talk about Rwanda, it was reborn after the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. It was a shattered nation. Nothing was functioning. Nothing was going on except grief and sorrows and trauma from the survivors. But the story about Rwanda, I'm a young person, but I'm also impressed. I draw inspiration from the story about Rwanda. But allow me to talk about the rugby part.
Okay.
Yeah. Before we got on air, we had interesting topics, but let's talk about the rugby part. Your period, the period you've spent in Rwanda so far. What's your your first impressions about Rwanda, especially in the context of rugby, and how have you seen the sport here, and how do you think it will contribute, and how does it align with your vision of the rugby sport in Africa and all over the world?
Well, there are many aspects to the multi-questions there.
Yes.
I think that Rwanda has huge potential. Leadership is what it's about. You have Kamanda, who is the president of Rwanda Rugby, who is a strong man. He believes and understands the way forward. He understands, as with all sports, What happens in Rwanda rugby must be embodied within
We're talking about
Rwanda here.
the commander as well.
I just call him Commander by his first name. He's the president of Rwanda Rugby. Tassis. But Commander, as I call him, extraordinary man, who's developing the game at grassroots level and different levels.
Yes.
And trying to establish Rwanda as a focal point within Africa. To be at the top, no, that's tough. That's the Springboks.
Yes.
That's South Africa. And then you have a whole range of other countries who have been playing it for a million years.
Yes.
The Kenyans, the Namibians, the Ugandans, the Zimbabweans, Madagascar, who play extraordinary rugby on that island. And then Rwanda really says, what is the pathway to greatness? And I think that is where Rwanda is different from elsewhere. And it's important that we take Rwanda rugby along the same philosophy that your extraordinary president has imbued within Rwanda. We see it in basketball. You've got cycling coming here this year, a number of different things. And it says that if you're prepared to invest in the youth, therefore make rugby part of the national curriculum at schools, in different form, contact, not contact, you then start having a pathway like South Africa, Zimbabwe, Kenya. It's through the youth. And then it grows through thereof. Gender, massively important. You see the number of women playing rugby today globally and within Africa is huge. And I think the recipe and the timing is right now. That the critical marriage that makes sports great is first government. It's the federations and the people. All embodied and wrapped around money. Because sport ultimately is big business. And I think Rwanda is at that cusp. You have a new multi-purpose stadium. You have a union that is encouraging it across the body. We've come here to Rwanda in this week in our growth eventing that we're doing here at the moment to also show what structures that we expect within World Rugby. We have to help because it's like a franchise. You don't just start basketball and play it for the sake of it. There must be a system that shows growth, the marketing of it, the management of accounts, money, finances, Medicare, nutrition, strength, conditioning, building. It's a whole package that the supporter only sees the end product. And with rugby, we're also trying to help across the board because the challenges are huge. Most countries in Africa think there's only one sport in the world called football. But in society, there are people who are so tall, people who are so short.
Yes.
People who are so fat, people who are so thin. People can run so fast, people can run for a long distance. There's a sport for all. Rugby is the one sport that encapsulates everything. You can have somebody 2 meters tall and 160 kilos, playing at the same time with somebody who is 1 meter 65 and 70 kilos. The big guy must learn to play with the small guy. The fast guy needs the support of the guy who never gets tired. It's a combination of things that ultimately allows the game to be so beautiful and come together.
Yes.
And isn't that society? Society has people from all different backgrounds. Rugby has that in a way that you do not have. You cannot have a whole set of 1 meter 70 basketball players. You cannot have 160 kilo football players. So rugby is unique in that way. And in order to train for rugby, you have qualities that you don't have in other sports. And I say that boldly because my background, I was president of one of the greatest football teams in Africa for many years. Ghana's Kumasi Asante Kotoko. Everybody knows that when you talk El Ali and the big teams, Kotoko is up there as one of those great teams. The value system is just not the same. We teach rugby discipline, respect, team building, working together, the planning, the coordination, everything that goes with it as one. So we would hope that Rwanda engages, accepts this philosophy, mates it with a union, which is the Rwandan Rugby Union here, in a way that can develop the sport, can provide opportunities for everybody, in a platform that works. And I think you've got a leadership here, really, that makes it a little bit special.
I mean, you might have answered this within what you just talked about, starting with what the commander, the rugby chief, the rugby boss is spearheading and running in the background. But what really attracted you to Rwanda in terms of promoting the sport?
I think you come onto the political platform of what you've achieved. You know, last year I gave a talk in Marrakesh at there's an African business forum. And I was on, I forget whether it was Bloomberg or one of the others. And we were talking, and I think I started one of the talks I gave with the fact that if you take Martin Luther King, we all have a dream. And we talk about this dream. Where do we go if you have gold but no gold refinery? How does Africa develop if you have oil but no oil refinery? If you have chocolate but no chocolate processing plant? You have cassava without a refinery plant. The fact of the matter is, we are blessed with the best in the world. And yet across Africa, whether it is because of colonialism, whether it is mismanagement, whether it is leadership which has not looked at its people, gold is produced and then shipped to Europe or Americas or the Far East or the Middle East and is refined, and they make the value-added money. The cocoa is produced here and the chocolate is made in Switzerland or Belgium or something else. It has to change. And so when you look at Rwanda taking charge of its destiny in the way that it is and providing the opportunity for people to see the growth pattern economically, and then looking at what it's trying to do through sports, that is an opportunity that it says to us that if we want to come and talk to Africa about a growth plan, a way to go, surely this is the place to come and do it.
Allow me to tackle on this. What specific projects or initiatives are you planning to implement to promote rugby both in Rwanda but mostly in Africa?
Well, you know, Rugby Africa has a general program for growth. As the rugby affiliate for Africa, Rugby Africa, our mandate is really to grow the game. And that's why I started talking about children. We have a Getting Into Rugby program, which is from the kids growing up. We can provide competition platforms, but we're desperately looking for countries who understand that sport is for all, opportunities for all, the gender, it does not matter. You need to encourage it. And if you accept that premise, then it is that we start a program. We've got regional development officers, regional development managers. We've got a complete structure that goes through territories, making sure that people are educated on the game, the rules of the game, imparting knowledge on nutrition, on fitness, on strength training, on how to organize the very concepts of what rugby is about at different levels. So that is the starting block for us. And we're doing it right across the continent of Africa. Under the cohorts of World Rugby, it is they who have the program. We have to adapt it because it applies differently for different places. And then from there you then take it age grade right the way through until you get to full international level.
Mr. Herbert, Rwanda is one of the countries that has the sport complexes in Africa that are really suitable to host rugby matches. How do you think facilities like Amahoro Stadium, I'm sure you've visited the facility, how do you think they will contribute to the growth and development of the sport?
Infrastructure must be provided by government at every level, in capitals, regionally. So I think it's a statement, and it's a massive statement. And I did have the honor of meeting your new Honorable Minister of Sport. And I did mention, look, Rugby Africa is willing to work with Rwanda. I think that there's a fertile ground for us to start hosting continental and global tournaments here in Rwanda. I really do think so. I've just come from Uganda, where there's been an extraordinary tournament of such global levels. Godwin, the president there, working with the minister and their connections to the presidency, hosted and put on an extraordinary tournament. We've seen it in Harare in Zimbabwe this year, and in Madagascar, where governments are getting more involved in putting up the hosting costs and the hosting rights for tournaments. And I think that here is a classic example where we should be doing exactly the same. So I have thrown out a hand of offer. I hope that with time, that will be accepted and be part of an overall plan to develop rugby here in Rwanda.
Yeah, it was my intention to ask you whether you've had discussions with sport officials here in Rwanda, and maybe the key takeaways, and because I assume it's one of the big plans that involved your travel to Rwanda. What are the takeaways to your conversations with the sport officials here?
Well, they were very receptive. There were initial discussions, but I think I left them under no doubt that we are committed. So if there's a will, certainly there will be a way. And I hope that encapsulates what rugby is doing. And I think that when we leave, hopefully that discussion will go further forward. This is a time we're already planning for 2025, 2026, 2027. We now operate in a 4-year cycle. So a number of countries are now jumping in and wanting to tie in on a 2-year, 3-year program to say, we don't want to do it just 1 year, we want to do it the following year. Of course, we're expecting a situation where host countries will pick up the hosting costs. It's normal, like, as in football. But the opportunity for Rwanda is definitely there.
Right. And as we come to the conclusion of our discussion, how does Rugby Africa ensure that inclusivity and when we talk about inclusivity, we talk about people with disabilities, and even talking about the gender norms, the gender without exclusion. How is this one of the priorities, and how is this one of the things you ensure to put in place, that there is no one left out, especially in the areas that some people are not? These services, these sports activities reach them later on at stage of development and growth.
Well, I think by definition what rugby is doing is massively inclusive. Next year we have the Women's World Cup, Rugby World Cup final, 15s in the UK. In Africa it is South Africa who qualified, and they'll play the giants of England and New Zealand, Australia, and all the other countries. So gender is very much part of. We've just come from the Olympics, where in the sevens tournament, I think there was a total of 266,000 people entered into the main stadium.
Yes.
Over the period to watch the women's playing rugby. So the women's game is that big, where you have over 250,000 people attending and endorsing the women's game. We have women's tournaments in November, December. We have the African Women's Sevens Tournament that will be taking place. It should be in North Africa, in Tunisia. The top 8 or so countries will be participating. Earlier this year we had the ladies 15s in Madagascar, which was won by South Africa. The runners-up were Madagascar. So South Africa go to the World Cup, Madagascar go to a VXV competition. It's like a challenger competition. So the ladies' game is really, really, really growing. And I do not see any reason why it should not also be growing here in Rwanda. You'll find that in every area. I was in France a few months ago with the President of French Rugby, Florian Grill, and one of his aims is to really go from town to town, encouraging the less fortunate, some of those who are physically impaired. So you will find that as a body, we're encouraging. Then you take individuals And I think you'll find the growth of the women's game, etc., here in Rwanda will depend a lot on Rwanda Rugby themselves. We are encouraging it. We are opening the door. And if they are ready, I can't think of anything better than to have a women's age grade tournament here in Namibia, in Rwanda for 10, 15, 18 countries all coming in to play at the same time. I can't think of anything better. I was mentioning Namibia because of what they had achieving underneath South Africa across the men's game. And I was with the ladies representative yesterday, and they are making huge investments in training and the dynamics of the game. And I was pointing out to them that the women's game, for example, in Ghana is run by women, not by men for women. And I've taken a leaf out of the English Rugby Football Union book where they run their own budgets, raise their own money. They don't have to be running under the men. And you can create those kind of scenarios if you have strong individuals, obviously, good levels of transparency and accountability. But very much the future, very much the future.
Where do you envision rugby in Africa in the next decade, and what role does Rwanda have to play? Is it expected to play?
I was in France, and we voted on the nation's expansion of the World Cup program. And they introducing a Nations Cup. And they said, are you putting an extra slot for Africa? They said no. And people said to me, what did I think? And I said, I agree. We don't want our teams going to global competitions and losing by basketball scores. And we don't want people getting injured. The development of the game in Africa is moving at such a fast rate that I believe that by 2028, 2029, 2030, you're going to have more South Africa level, not as good as the Springboks, but moving in that direction to be able to compete with anybody in the world. Mm-hmm. We will be by 2032 at global tournaments on merit. You will have South Africa. We just had the Rugby Africa Cup in Uganda. Zimbabwe were first. Mm-hmm. They beat the mighty Namibians. Algeria was second. Namibia were third. Mm-hmm. Kenya were fourth. So you can see that the investment that is going in is changing dramatically. I see the physical sizes of rugby players who were so small 10 years ago are now giants within Africa, I'm talking about. I think the future is bright. I really do. 10 years' time, you're going to have 2-3 countries within the top 20 being able to play with the best. You're going to have one other within the top 12 apart from South Africa. Mm-hmm. We'll be going to World Cups and watching and say, wow, this is what Africa is doing at that level.
I can't wait.
Absolutely.
As I said, we're winding up. Allow me to ask you this question. What has been the most rewarding part of being the president of rugby in Africa?
I'm not sure if there's anything rewarding. It's unlike other sporting federations, the president of Rugby Africa and his exco do not receive any salary. So we are there because we love the game. We're fighting the fight. I think within the last year, I understand what it is to be a political leader dealing across a continent, because I'm dealing with different cultures. Africa is not a country. It's the greatest continent of the earth, made up of different cultures.
Yes.
And maybe Rwanda should be where we learn from, because the struggle is sometimes between Francophone and Anglophone. And we are having to bring them together because Africa is one.
Yes.
There are many who embrace it, understand it, accept it. And there are others who are stuck in the old ways and don't want to understand it and accept it. The simple fact of the matter is that if your colonial masters are French, you do things in a certain way. If your colonial masters are English, you do things in a certain way. Mm-hmm. The English and the French have been fighting themselves for over 500 years. So you can understand, I joke, but you can understand the complexities of bringing people together. And you hope that the simple sport of playing this beautiful, irregular shaped ball will bring us together. So in the short time of leadership, the challenge has been bringing the cultures together. Letting people understand that sport is big business. But then asking them from fundamental mindset change to make the dream possible. Because the Almighty God has given us the best. Physicality, diversity, the presence of who the true African is. Mm-hmm. We can play football. We can box. We can play basketball. Mm-hmm. We can run. We can play rugby. We can play cricket. Mm-hmm. We can be the fastest 200-meter runner in the world. Is an African born in Africa. Mm-hmm. The fastest 100-meter runner in the world is a black American with African roots from somewhere. We can win the 10,000 meters. We can wear a Netherlands jersey but be an African of African extract. We are an extraordinary continent. Just imagine if we get the investment. Just imagine if we put the infrastructure. You will go to a village in Rwanda one day and somebody will be picking up something so heavy and it's natural for him, or he's walking back from the farm and he's got 80 kilos on his back and he's been doing it as a norm. We have people who don't have to go and be mentally prepared to do the hard work. Mm-hmm. It is in our genes. And I just look for a time where we can harness this greatness and understand that the people who pay to watch it on television globally should be prepared to pay and bring that money back into Africa.
Right. What message do you have to rugby supporters and fans, both in Rwanda and Africa?
I say, have the belief.
Trust the process.
Have that belief. Whatever and whoever you believe in.
Yes.
Because we have our beliefs in Africa. We had forefathers who achieved greatness. Keep the belief of greatness. Never give up. Do not believe that you have to play second best to anybody. Look across your continent. Look to the south. You'll see what it is that the Springboks have done to the whole world. Look to the east, and you'll see exactly what long distance runners and athletes have done to the whole world. Look to the west, and you'll see what the footballers perpetually do to the whole west, to the whole world. Look to the north, and look at the technical brilliance of Africans in the north, and today look at what Morocco is doing to the whole world. Africa has got what the world has dreams of having. We just don't have that infrastructure, that investment, that marriage with capital and government and business, that our greatness can shine. And I say to Africa, understand how great we really are. Do not give up. There's a curve of greatness that is following you. It has almost reached us. And when we reach that point, with the investment and government, business and capital, get it. Mm-hmm. That there is a $7 billion a year business that if you invest in it, you will reap the rewards here in Africa. Nobody will want to leave Africa. You'll just be sitting down and the whole world will be coming to us because we provide the entertainment, the excellence, the class that they can only dream of.
Mr. Herbert, I could sit here and listen to you all day. You know, you caught me the first time when you told me your understanding on the cameras, yet I could still enjoy the topics about the sport. But allow me to thank you for taking time to talk to us today.
My pleasure. And remember what I said before when we were off camera.
Yes.
The future is you. It's not us.
Right.
Over 70% of this beautiful continent are under the age of 30. 56 to 60% are under the age of 22, 24. Mm-hmm. You get things that the old people don't get. There's a brilliance and an intelligence that is the African youth. And that's what I want everybody to really understand. You're brilliant, you get it. Your morality and ethics and understanding of the world is something that maybe we have trodden the path and paid our dues and done the suffering that your parents and your grandparents have done. Mm-hmm. But it is now, it is your time. And I really believe that the African youth, given the chance, can and will deliver.